Okay, all right. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about autonomy. I'm going to break this video up into two different videos because the autonomy chapter we're going to explore over a couple weeks. Okay, so first off, what is autonomy? Now, autonomy is going to be very closely linked to freedom. So it's the ability to control our own lives, the ability to make our own decisions, the ability to live the kind of life that we deem valuable and fulfilling and worthwhile. So that essentially is this idea of autonomy, this idea of control, that we are the directors of our lives rather than someone who is forced to live a life that they did not in fact choose. And autonomy is going to be distinct from what many would call paternalism. And so in paternalism, the idea is that it comes from the word parent. You can see that in the very name. Whereas parents direct their children. Parents essentially are in control of their children. Children are not yet ready to make their own choices. They're not yet capable of fully understanding what is good and bad, what is right and wrong, what is safe and unsafe, so on and so forth. Now, because they don't have that understanding, they don't yet have that capacity, parents are the ones who tell children. They set rules, they set limits, they set boundaries. And there's many times when a parent will say, no, you are not allowed to do this, and it's for your own good. Paternalism, it's not just that you control someone, it's that you control someone or that you direct them or you prohibit them from doing something for the sake of their own well-being. So you, as the parent, understand better than the child what is best for them. A classic kind of example, an easy example, would be a kid may want to eat candy for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and may want to eat ice cream for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And a kid may be perfectly happy doing that, and a kid may think that that is in their best interest, because that is what gives them pleasure, that is what they love. Yet, as the parent, you know that a child eating candy every day of their lives, for all three meals, is going to be incredibly self-destructive. It is going to be very bad for their health. And in the long run, it is going to end up hurting the child. So you, as the parent, understanding better than the child what is best for them, you set rules and you set boundaries. And so the question becomes whether, as a society, we should be paternalistic to our adult members. Should society be in the business of telling people what they should and should not do based on their self-interest? Kind of classic examples. Gun control might be one. Somebody might say, look, it is in my interest. I really believe that it is good for me or fulfilling for me or worthwhile for me to have automatic assault weapons, for whatever purpose that person wants the automatic assault weapons. Now, society might say, no, you may feel that's in your best interest, but it is not, for whatever reason. And if they're saying it's not in your best interest to have these weapons, then that's paternalistic. Now, society might say, look, it may be in your best interest, but it's not in the best interest of others, it's not in the best interest of society as a whole. So that would be a kind of a non-paternalistic reasoning. But you could have very kind of explicit paternalistic reasonings. For example, the soft drink law that was attempted to be passed in New York and in other places as well, which essentially limits the amount of soda you can get at one time. I think it was bringing it down from a 64 ounce to a 48 ounce. And the rationale is that people don't need 64 ounces of sugary, carbonated drink. And that it's not good for them to drink that amount of soda at one time. And so it's paternalistic in the sense that the society is saying you cannot have this because it is not good for you. And that is an offense or it violates autonomy because somebody might say, well, maybe for a lot of people that's not in their self-interest, but for me, either because it's for pleasure or because it keeps me awake or for whatever other reason, I do view it as in my self-interest to drink this soda, to drink this kind of huge soft drink. And a paternalistic society is one that might say, and in this case would say no. A society based on autonomy and privileging autonomy would be one that says yes. Kind of one final example could be Obamacare could be viewed in this way, in the sense that it is in your best interest to have health insurance, Because should you not have health insurance and you run into a catastrophic or really debilitating disease, that's going to be bad for you. It's going to cost a lot of money. It's going to, most likely throw you into bankruptcy. Now, the paternalistic side would say, even if you don't recognize that this is in your best interest to start getting insurance now, it is. The autonomous society, the one that really values people making their own decisions, would say, yeah, maybe it is in your best interest, but it's up to you to determine that. Now, on pages 150 and 158 of the Gibson reading, he refers to Mill, and John Stuart Mill very much goes against this idea that paternalism and critiques paternalism. And essentially what he's saying is, look, there is no one more interested in you than you. There's no one that knows you better. There's no one that understands you better. There's no one that cares more deeply about you than yourself. Again, we're kind of assuming that this is an adult at this point, not a child. Because a child may care most about themselves, but a child doesn't necessarily understand what is best for themselves. So Mill is saying, look, nobody in the world knows you as well as you do. Nobody in the world understands your goals and your desires and what is important to you as you, and nobody cares for you as much as you. And so the idea that someone would know better what is best for you is false. And let me just kind of give an example. Smoking a cigarette, right? So for many people, they'd say, look, that is bad for you. That is bad for your health. It's going to cause, health problems later on. It's going to cost you a lot of money. There's kind of a social stigma with it now. And that all may be true, and you may understand that if you're a smoker, but you may also say, look, I just really like the stress relief. For me, it is a relief, kind of breaks up my day. It tones things down a little bit. I get to take a breather. I get to kind of maybe hang out with some other people that smoke as well. And so for you may have taken all the factors into consideration and simply determined that for you, smoking is still in your best interest, despite the long-term consequences. And John Stuart Mill says you're the one who's got to make that decision, not society as a whole or some kind of elite group. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is a critique of autonomy that we base not on paternalism, but on a Catholic kind of viewpoint. And certainly Catholics value freedom and they value autonomy, but they're going to critique a society that makes autonomy a fundamental or ultimate goal. They're going to critique a society that says autonomy is the absolute most important thing, or the foundational principle, or what we've got to focus on first. And if you look at the Catholic vocation for a business leader, essentially the basis of this critique is going to be the idea that we are receptive, that as human beings we receive life from God and from our parents, from our society as well. In a certain sense, it shapes us. There are values that are kind of given to us in our consciousness, or our conscience, excuse me. And we don't simply create our own lives just on our own. We aren't simply these kind of independent, isolated, atomistic agents that shape our lives in whatever way we feel best. That's not really what human life is all about. You can do that, but it's not the truth of human life. It's not the deepest meaning of human life. The deepest meaning of human life is to participate in an experience and an existence which comes from something other. And we have God that ultimately gives us this existence, and God which imbues it with value. And it's those values that we ought to adopt, and we ought to promote, and we ought to try to live by. And so when you focus too much on autonomy, you can miss that. You can start to believe that the world is something that you shape according to your own opinion. And every individual shapes and has the right to shape their life in the way that he or she feels fit. And so they would critique an economic system where the core basic foundational value is autonomous individuals doing whatever they want, purchasing whatever they want, being employed wherever they want. Catholics are going to be much more of the idea that you should participate in something greater than yourself. And this goes with the common good as one of the basic values. Common good means that we're not simply individuals. An individual life is important, freedom is important, and shaping our lives is important, but it's not the ultimate, and it's not the full story. we're ultimately beings that exist in relationships with others. Okay, so there's the two kind of critiques. You got the paternalistic critique, which would say, somebody else has to or knows better than yourself what is best for you, and the Catholic critique, which would be more, I think, subtle, essentially say that that we have to kind of get out of this mode where we are in complete control of ourselves, and that is the most important thing. So then Gibson goes on, and he talks about, well, what are the elements? So we're going to talk about an autonomous person. What exactly constitutes autonomy? And he gives three factors. One is intent. To be autonomous, it's not enough for something simply to happen or to do something accidentally. Like maybe you get a promotion because you happen to be in the right place at the right time, or you happen to get a sale that you had no idea was coming and you didn't know the person. It just, it sort of happened. You have to intentionally want to do something, plan to do something. So you have a plan you put into action. It's going to be a factor in the autonomous person. But when you talk about autonomy, it is important, and Gibson mentioned this, to be careful because it's not always clear what our intent is, even to ourselves. For example, people often tend to attribute the best intent to themselves and the worst intent to others. Just think about driving. People often think if they make a mistake on the road, well, it was just a mistake, it was an error, it's a one-time thing, or, maybe, I was really tired, I just couldn't help it this time. But when another person drives poorly, they're jerks, they're idiots, they're inconsiderate, they're dangerous. Because, again, we oftentimes don't fully see our intent for what it is, and we try to kind of attribute the best intent to ourselves. But it is important for autonomy to have intention. The next factor of autonomy that Gibson mentions is understanding. And understanding is going to be something that we've talked quite a bit about in this course. Because for a market to be truly free, you have to understand what you are buying, what you're purchasing. And we talked about this quite a bit with regard to Friedman. And that's why for Friedman, honesty is absolutely essential. Because if you don't have an honest producer, then the consumer doesn't, or the employee, doesn't know what they're signing up for, doesn't know really what they're purchasing. And so they can't make a truly free decision and rational decision if the important and relevant factors are not clearly communicated. And so then Gibson goes on, he says, okay, if you want information, if understanding is central, then what challenges the possibility of gaining that information? He talks about, well, one challenge is you rely on sales associates oftentimes to explore whether you want to buy a particular purchase. Are they being honest? Are they being fully disclosive? Are they telling you, communicating to you all the important factors? And that can be really tricky, especially if a sales associate, their pay is based on sales, if they're working by commission. Another challenge, potential barrier to understanding, is actually, ironically, too much information. Like, for example, if a producer gave you 10 pages of fine typed print, and it was small font, and maybe the relevant information is there, but they also pack it with technical jargon or irrelevant information, and just it becomes a situation where the really key important facts aren't clearly evident and clearly visible, and practically aren't accessible. Yes, you could go through that 10-page fine print document, but in reality, most of us simply don't have the time. And if we did that for every purchase we made, it would be impossible. So does the producer put out this vast amount of information for the purpose of confusing the consumer? If so, you could say that's a barrier to autonomy. Other kind of barriers and questions is whether we have to have first-hand knowledge. Do we have to really be able to experience something to be able to truly say we understand what we're purchasing? Do we have to have a visceral encounter with the decision we're about to make? For example, I used smoking earlier, and I said you could have a person who views it as in their best interest to smoke. But before they make that decision, should they have to visit, for example, a cancer ward where people are dying of emphysema, dying of lung cancer because of smoking? Should that be a prerequisite to saying they fully understand what they're getting themselves into? Or, to go back to the soft drink example, if someone is living a very high-fat, unhealthy diet, should they be forced to visit places that are working with obese people that have great difficulties, health difficulties because of their obesity? Can you understand? Can you really say you're autonomous in freely making the decision unless you've been in that situation? So those are important factors to consider. One final example, a college student who's taking out a big loan. Should they talk to people and be forced to talk to people that have high college debts before they actually take out that loan? Should they have to have that experience with someone who is dealing with the burden of this debt before making the decision to do it? Another kind of element, potentially, of understanding would be this idea of tests or licensing. For example, before we allow someone to own a firearm, they have to get a license. Before we allow someone to drive, they have to get a license. Should there be tests and licenses for certain products? For all products? For more products that are on the market right now? Should you, for example, have to take a test before you buy a chainsaw? Can you say you really understand what you're buying before you've been through a course with that material, that product? And if not, again, are you understanding what you're purchasing? That's what a test or a license generally would do, to assure that you understand how to use this product, and what this product is, and what this product can do, and what are the dangers or the benefits of this product. And then a third element of autonomy would be the idea of voluntary choice. Do you actually choose of your own accord? Or is this a choice that is forced upon you? For example, to go back to the La Clemenceau, the shipbuilding example, there you have people, and this is in the right section of the Gibson text, there you have people that are in extreme poverty, and they don't have any other options. There are very few options. And essentially, you could say their choice is between starving or getting this dangerous, low-paying job, but a paying job. In that case, are they truly autonomous? If their options are so few and so stark, either take the job or starve to death and live in kind of abject poverty. If those are your options, are you truly free? Same thing with this idea of poor people that live in what they call food deserts. Food deserts are places where you are surrounded by unhealthy food options. There's not the grocery store, the supermarket where you can buy fresh fruit or fresh vegetables. And there's many people that live in these situations. And these people don't necessarily have a car where they can just simply drive to a supermarket that is at least accessible by car. Do they really have an option? Do they really have a choice to live a healthy lifestyle when they've got few options in terms of actually purchasing healthy foods? Okay, so that's the first part of the autonomy section. And really, there's two major components of this video. One is the critiques of autonomy, and two are exploring kind of the elements of autonomy and what those elements consist of.